Hey everybody, Connor here today, etrailer.com. We're going to be taking a look at the CURT Spectrum Trailer Brake Controller here for our 2020 Jeep Gladiator. So here's what our brake controller looks like installed on the dash of our Gladiator. Granted, we do have a few different options for mounting, so this part of the review can vary a little bit. But we actually found a nice flat surface here on our front dash bezel here, our center dash, which is going to be a great place to mount the control knob. As you can see here, it's actually going to blend in really well with our other control knobs. It gives us a very factory sleek-like appearance. So in regards to brake controllers, you're going to have quite a few different options here for a Gladiator. But the great thing about the CURT Spectrum is, and the reason I recommend you go this route is, because it's going to have an almost hidden, completely hidden like factory install look. Now we touched earlier about the control knob here blending in well with our other knobs, but something also you don't realize is the main control box that sort of has the brains of the operation, that's going to be mounted up under our dash completely out of sight. So this is again just going to give us the same look as it would as if the truck came from the factory with the brake controller. The only thing that's going to be visible is our control knob over here. So in regards to brake controller functionality, there's two main types on the market here. A time delayed and a proportional controller, which you see here. The proportional controller is going to be ideal for most applications, and basically what the proportional mode means is it's going to allow you to apply a braking force equal to the trailer than you are applying in the vehicle. Essentially, in a basic term, what this means is if I step on the brakes really hard in the towed vehicle, we're going to have that same amount of force applied to the trailer. But if I only just slightly depress the brake pedal here on our vehicle, we're only going to transfer a small amount of braking force to our trailer. So we're going to get a real even stopping between the vehicle and trailer. We're not going to have to worry about one pushing the other. So our CURT Spectrum, it's going to talk to us via these lights here on the outside. These are going to be LED lights, and they're going to flash different colors depending on what the brake controller is doing and what mode you have entered. So if we have this first mode here, this is just going to be the brightness setting pretty much. So we can toggle through the brightness to have it dim or a bright white light, whichever we prefer. Then if we click the button once, that's going to bring us to our next setting, which is going to be brake output. Well, essentially what this means is this is going to be how much force is sent to the trailer's brakes based on our tow vehicle. So if we only want a little bit, we're not going to be towing real heavy, we don't need quite a lot of stopping power, we can go ahead and turn our control down. But when we do have those bigger trailers and we're fully loaded, we want full control of the brakes, so we can go ahead and turn it all the way up. Then the next screen here is going to be our purple and blue lights, and this is just going to be the sensitivity setting. And then last but not least, we have our manual override, which you can see here. That's going to be displayed by the red LEDs. Now within our manual override, we can also adjust the output of the override here, which essentially means how much power we're going to be sending back to the brakes. So while we have the button held and turned, we can go ahead and turn our control knob here, and that's going to adjust the power of our manual override. So there are a couple different colored lights you may see throughout the course of using your brake controller here. For instance, we're plugged into our trailer now, but if we were to unplug, we should see a couple blue lights up on our brake controller now. And basically what this means is the brake controller is receiving power, but we don't have a trailer plugged in. So another screen you're going to see here is going to be a full row of LEDs here, which is going to be when you first plug in your trailer, which we can see there. And then it's going to switch over to the output setting so you can adjust the power sent to your brakes. So in regards to installation, this is definitely going to be something I encourage you guys to tackle at home. We're not going to need any special tools, and you really don't need to have a lot of electrical or mechanical knowledge to be able to install one of these yourself. We will, however, need a harness, which will vary depending on how our Jeep is set up. If your Jeep came with a factory 4 and 7 pole trailer connector at the rear, chances are you have the factory tow package, and you can simply purchase a plug-in adapter, which we sell here at eTrailer. However, if your Jeep didn't come with any trailer connector whatsoever, chances are you didn't have the factory tow package, but you can still install this brake controller. You're just going to need a few other things, and it will require hardwiring. Still doable by yourself at home. So now that we've gone over some of the benefits and features, we've summarized the install, let's jump right into that installation and show you how it's done. So the first step of our installation here, we're going to take our control knob as it comes configured from our packaging here, and we need to find a place inside the vehicle here to mount it. Now, there'll be a couple different things we need to ensure that our mounting location has. Number one, that we have a smooth flat surface that our mounting bracket can sit flush on. And number two, it's going to need to be within reach of us while we're driving the vehicle, obviously. We went ahead and looked around, and there are not really many spots at all on this vehicle to mount this control knob. I will be honest with you there, but we did find a pretty good location we think that'll work for most of you. It's actually going to be right here in this location here, sort of on this center trim piece. So the way this is going to work is, there's actually two different ways that we can mount this. One of them is a stick-on mount, and one of them is a drill mount. Now the drill mount is actually going to look a lot better because we're going to be able to hide our wire. If you're using this location, I definitely recommend the drill mount option so we don't have a visible wire running all the way over to our driver footwell where the brake controller port is. So we're going to use the drill mount option. We're going to mount it in this location here. That's going to be within reach of us easily from the driver's seat. We're going to be able to see all our LEDs so we know what the control knob and our controller is doing, and most importantly at all, we have a smooth flat surface. Now I've already did some work for you. We went ahead and removed this panel. We've checked behind there that we're going to have room to drill into and mount it, as well as run our wire over. But we're actually not going to be doing that while the panel is attached to the center console here, so we need to go ahead and remove that. That said, it's going to be super simple to remove. There's going to be a few tabs which face inward here on the top and bottom, so let's go ahead and show you how to get that off now. So in order to help us get this panel off here, we do just need to pull straight out and sort of tilt it down because there's going to be some tabs here. But we're basically just going to take a plastic trim panel tool and we're going to try to work our way under the edges here and sort of pry out. We can hear it release. We want to make sure we sort of pull evenly or try to pull in the center as best we can because we don't want to damage any of those tabs. It's just like that. As we said, we need to go ahead and tilt it downward because we're going to have some tabs. But these are essentially, see these little white bits here? These are what's holding it onto the dash there. You can see they're facing straight out, so we just need to pull straight out. And then there's going to be an alignment tab on the bottom of this left-hand side here, which is why we need to sort of tilt it back. So let's go ahead and take this off the vehicle now to make it a little bit easier to work with. But before we do that, we're going to have two electrical connections here. They're super simple to remove. There's going to be a tab right there where to press, simply pull out. There's going to be another one over here as well. Now we can take this off the vehicle here, get it on a workbench so it's a little bit easier to work with. So as I mentioned earlier, the mounting bracket that comes already attached to our control knob here is going to be for the surface mount application, which we're not going to be doing. So we need to go ahead and remove that. In order to do this, you're going to see these square tabs on the outside. We're just going to take a flat head. We're just going to push those in a little bit. It should be very simple to release them. Then we can go ahead and take this bracket off. Because we are actually going to be using the drill mount bracket here, which we'll show you next. And it looks like this. So basically, just to give you an overview here, we're not going to go ahead and insert it, but this center hole here, there's going to be two holes we need to drill. This center hole here is what's going to be used to actually secure it to our panel here. We'll show you how that works a little bit later. And this top hole here is what we're actually going to use to mount our wires through. So what we need to do now is, so keep in mind, the orientation of this bracket does matter. This top hole here is going to be the top of our control knob. That's going to be where our LEDs are, so we need this to face up. But what we're going to do now is we're going to take our panel here and we are going to roughly mark out where it's going to need to sit. So we need to be careful of these curved edges here. We also need to be careful that when we look around to the back side that we're going to have space to drill our holes. Our holes ideally are going to come out in the center of this panel here. So we're going to have a locking tab on this side as well as part of the backing of our control knobs here. So let's go ahead and get that in a good location here, and then we'll use a little paint marker here to mark out the holes we need to drill. So now what I'm going to do is, in order to help our drill bit from walking I'm just going to take a punch tool here. I'm just going to try to score the surface a little bit, give us a little bit of an indentation for our drill bit to stay in. So because the surface is a little bit smoother there than what you normally might find some of the dash panels, we're going to take a smaller drill bit and we're going to drill out a pilot hole here. Now we can come back with our 5/16" drill bit and drill out our holes to the final size. So now we're going to take our provided Welnut here along with our mounting base, and we're going to go ahead and attach it to our bezel here. So we're going to come behind here. The Welnut is going to go in this larger hole here. Our wiring is going to go through that center hole. So we're going to go ahead and take this Welnut, insert it into the top hole that we've just drilled. Just like that. Then we're going to place our base over that hole. Our center hole should line up because there is going to be an indentation there to hold it. Now we can take our Phillips screw. We can use this to attach it to the bezel. We may need to push this down a little bit to give us clearance of our control knob as well. So now that we have our bracket secure, we're going to take the wires from our control knob, we're going to feed them through the center hole here. And we should be able to mount our control knob inside that bracket. It should just click right in place. So you can see here now we have our control knob mounted on our little bezel here. So the next step is to go ahead and snap it back in place. But before we do that, we need to route our wire down sort of in our driver footwell area, because that's where we're going to mount the main module box and then eventually connect to the brake controller port on the vehicle. But before we do all that, what we're going to do is we're going to remove one of the conjoining panels here, so we have a nice little space here to sneak our wire through. So this panel right here is super easy to remove. We're just going to grab at the bottom. You're just going to be removing sort of this little center panel here. But it's just going to be push fasteners here. We don't need any tools. We're just going to take our hands at the bottom. We're just going to sort of gently pull out. We should feel them release a little bit. Got that side out. Got that side out. And we'll work our way up. We don't want to pull at the bottom entirely. Once the clip's released, we want to move our hands up so we can get behind these a little bit better, give us more leverage and force so we're not putting as much stress on the material. But now that we have that out of the way, now we can go ahead and remount our little control knob panel here. So what we're going to do is we're going to tuck this wiring as best as we can. We may need to actually get some tape and secure it, but I think for now, if we just tuck the wire back behind here, behind these clips if you will, we should have plenty of space to sneak it there. So we may have to play with it a little bit, but we got our wire roughly where we think it needs to sit. But before we go ahead and attach the panel back on the dash here, we need to go ahead and reinstall our connectors. And they should just push right into place. That looks pretty good to me. So now that we have our panel mounted with our control knob, we can take the wire leads we have here, we can go ahead and begin pinning them to our connector which comes in the kit. Now you do need to take a little bit of time and patience when doing this next step here, because these pins need to be oriented in a certain direction before they can be inserted into the connector. The order of them is going to matter as well. Now if you do mess one up, it is possible to go ahead and undo it and then reinsert it in the correct position, but it's not quite as easy to do that. And the more we do that, we can actually weaken this plastic here, so it's best to do things right the first time. So there's a good diagram in the instructions here, but we're going to be holding the plug where this flap here, this flap is sort of the locking mechanism, that's going to be down. We're going to be have this part facing us, where the locking tab is going to be on top. And what we need to do is, you're going to see a number of pins here. The first one is actually going to be left empty. The second one, according to our instructions, is going to be for the white wire. So it's sort of hard to see because they're very small, but the part of the pin is going to have a very small indentation. There's going to be an opening as well as a tab here. That part is actually going to be inserted up in the connector. So we'll go ahead and pin this first one here for you. We're going to skip one, and the first one's going to be white. Then you should hear a very faint click when it's securely in place. So we're just going to go ahead and repeat this process according to the instructions for the rest of our pins here. Keep in mind the pins on the very end, to the very left, to the very right will be left blank. So you can hear that faint click there. Once we lock them in place, we'll go ahead and just give a nice little tug on them. If they don't come out, then we know they're seated properly. And again, it can really only go one way. So now we have the connector pinned following the instructions in our manual here. It's going to go white, green, brown, blue, black, and red depending on which way you're looking at it. But once we have all the pins in the correct position, if you take a look on the back side there, you should see all the metal tabs that we just inserted in there. You just want to make sure they're all towards the top. You don't have one halfway hanging down. Should be pretty obvious if that's the case. But I'm just going to go ahead and push them all up, make sure they're nice and secure. Then we can go ahead and close our little door here to lock everything in place. And there we have it. So if you remembered, we removed this panel here so we could sneak our wire behind the dash. This is going to be the center panel here, just held on with some clips on the back. But we're going to be using this to mount our main control unit. So if we flip this over, we're going to get a nice flat spot here. I've already went ahead and test fit everything just to make sure we have enough clearance. But we're going to have a good open space here beside these two tabs, which is going to allow our control box to fit in there perfectly. So what we're going to do is, we're going to go ahead and take our three-sided tape here, and we're going to mount this sort of in that location there. We may need to trim those a little bit, but it shouldn't be too much of an issue. So as you can see here, here is what our module is going to look like mounted on the back of our panel here. We just had to slightly trim some of these tabs here on the inside to get it to fit in there, but it wasn't a major modification at all, and now it fits perfectly, nice and flush to this flat surface. So right now, we're looking through the center of that panel that we just removed here because we need to locate the vehicle's factory brake controller port location. It's going to be directly behind this panel where our left knee would be behind normally, or left knee would be in front of. It's going to be behind this panel and taped to an existing wiring harness here. It's going to be a square gray 4-pin connector. All I did was sort of reach my head under the dash there, and it was pretty easy to see. It even had some yellow tape around there to help me identify it. So now we're going to take a vehicle-specific brake controller harness here, which keep in mind doesn't come with your kit. So you are going to need to purchase this separately here for eTrailer. But once we have this, we can just go ahead and snake it up in through this hole here. And we can connect it to that 4-pin we just showed you. So now what we're going to do is we are going to take the other end of our harness that we just used. We're actually going to loop it back up through this hole here. Because once it comes out here, one end here, this end is going to connect to the harness off of our main module unit. And the other end here, you're going to see that's actually going to connect to the pinned connector we just made coming from the control module. So let's go ahead and make our connections now. We should hear a lock in place when the connections are seated properly. And we will take the harness here. We are probably going to need to route that behind the steering wheel column as best as we can. And it should connect only one way into our main control unit here. We hear it click in place. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take some zip ties here, and we're just going to tie up our existing wires here so we don't have them flopping around. Then we can just go ahead and pop our panel back into place. And that's going to do it today for our look and installation of the CURT Spectrum Trailer Brake Controller here for our 2020 Jeep Gladiator.